and we're off.
Okay, welcome everybody. The link on the screen here, and I'll put in the text chat, is the page where you found the registration form to register for this webinar. It's also where we'll embed the recording probably sometime next week. So this is our Getting Savvy with Digital Tools session. And we have a presenters panel here where you can review a little bit about the session, a bit about us, and then there's a drop down in the accordion here for each of the guest speakers today, a summary of their session, a bit of a bio, and links to their social media. So we encourage you to follow them on social media, and in most cases there's a link to their presentation. I haven't got Tim's, but we'll link that in afterwards. And then there's a What Next panel that we'll come to at the end. So I'll stop my sharing now, and I'm sure as usual Lillian is going to do a quick summary of what people said they wanted to learn from this session.
Yeah, so we have people joining us from the United Arab Emirates, welcome, Ireland, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, United States, Pakistan, as well as all our colleagues in the United Kingdom. And lots of people are attending for kind of AI related reasons, but lots of other people also wanting to kind of find out the latest approaches with digital pedagogy and tools really, and how to kind of think about digital skills that we're going to need. What skills do students need? Any distinction between the kind of skills acquired during the pandemic and now, especially with AI infringing? How can we help students to be more savvy in these digital environments? And tools that will help staff and students to embrace and use AI tools, and ways to support staff with this as well. And then one overarching question: how can you tell if a tool is likely to be short-lived and not useful for a long-term investment? $1 million question. So I think to kickstart our conversation, we're actually going to move over to Tim, who is actually coming from Australia. So it's very late in the night for him. Tim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Fawns. I am Associate Professor in the Monash Education Academy, which is a kind of teaching and learning centre at Monash University. And I have a background in online education, digital and technology sort of research and scholarship. I was previously at the University of Edinburgh, where I was helping to run an online postgraduate master's in clinical education. So I have an interest in clinical education, professional education, higher education, faculty development, digital stuff, technology, and whatnot.
I'm so pleased to have Tim with us today, because I came across Tim via Twitter, and as some of you perhaps know, I've worked with colleagues from Monash in the past. I've written with colleagues from Monash, and I was just so delighted to find someone who was thinking seriously, not just in a binary way of tech or pedagogy, but looking at what happens when you mesh the two together. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Tim, about entanglement.
That's great. Are you asking me to start my presentation? So, right, okay.
That was very British, wasn't
it? Yeah, I've moved to Australia, so I need everything to be direct. Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. I never quite answer the brief in any straightforward way, so I hope that's okay. I'm assuming I was invited under those kind of parameters. So techno-savvy is a funny phrase, and I'm going to try and come at it from an entangled pedagogy view, which I'll explain in a second. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the land from which I speak, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So this diagram has a lot on it, and I'll explain it fairly quickly. the first column is what I call technology drives pedagogy, or a technology first view. And here, technology is seen as the driver of change, which I call a kind of technological determinism. So in this view, it's technology that makes change. The teacher doesn't have very much agency because the technologies or the tools predict what happens, predict the outcomes. And the skill of education here is really about choosing and correctly using particular tools. The reason I'm going through this is because I think that this view of entangled pedagogy will helps me understand how technology works in education and what we then need in order to be savvy. So I call this first column an illusion because I don't think it ever quite works like this. The second column I also call an illusion, and it's pedagogy driving technology, or a pedagogy first column. So probably some of you have heard people say pedagogy first, or pedagogy has to drive technology. We need to make sure that it's the pedagogy and it's not the technology that's driving change. But I'm calling this a kind of pedagogical determinism, where educators are seen as the drivers of change, and teachers have a lot of agency here. And really, technologies are just tools. They're neutral tools that educators can use to achieve whatever ends they want. So the skill is the teacher's skill, and the methods they use are what predicts the outcomes, and the skill involves choosing the methods and using the tools according to those methods. So I think that's an illusion as well. What I think is actually the case, and I kind of removed the word pedagogy from this equation because I think it's a bit of an obscure word. It's difficult. People think it means different things. So what I want to say is, what are the ingredients that actually shape change? And I think it's a mutual shaping of the purposes, the multiple purposes that educational stakeholders bring, the context in which they're bringing, the kind of teaching that they're doing, who are the students, what discipline is it, what level is it at, what conditions are they in, those sort of things, the values of all of these different people, what do they think matters, the methods that they are employing. And by methods, I don't just mean that it's a lecture or a tutorial, but really each type of method is a kind of template that's adapted in situ, in context. So the methods are quite situated as well, and the technology. And I'm calling that entangled pedagogy because I think it's not hierarchical. It's just all tangled up and you have to look at it holistically. I'm also saying that technology isn't an isolated thing that comes in and you do something with it, or it affects change, but that it's always multiple and contextual and relational. By multiple, I mean that there's always more than one technology going on at a time. If you think about a car is a technology, but a car is also made of technologies. It's headlights, a steering wheel, an engine, a boot, wheels, etc. And it's contingent on other technologies like a road and street signs and traffic lights and all sorts of things. So it only really makes sense as there's multiple coincidence of technologies. And it's that coincidence in context that actually makes technology what it is. And that's how I think we need to understand it. It's relational in the sense that it doesn't act independently of us, but it's us and the technology that matters here. And it's this kind of mutual shaping. Technology helps us organize the world. It sort of shapes who we are and what we do, and we shape how we use it, etc. So it's always mutual. So here, agency is negotiated between a whole lot of elements. I almost said elephants, teachers and technology and students and policy and infrastructure. And the outcomes are not easily predicted because they're contingent on all these complex relations and nobody has full control. So the skill here is about configuring these different elements, making designs that allow for emergence and orchestration to kind of bring those emergent activities back towards our different shared values and purposes, and the practices that we develop to do all those things. I added a fourth column, which I'm saying is aspirational, because I think it's very difficult, but it's the kind of direction that this entangled view suggests that we move towards for me. So I'm emphasizing purpose, context, and values over methods and technology, not because they're more important. I said it's not hierarchy, but because I think they're easy to forget. Methods and technologies are right in your face, they're visible, you know what they are. And it's very easy to lose track of your values and what you were trying to achieve and the kind of contextual aspect of things. From here, I think educators, students, and others aspirationally should collaborate in order to negotiate this uncertainty. And in order to do that, we have to embrace the idea of uncertainty, the fact that nothing is perfect. We aren't perfect as educators, our designers aren't perfect. We need to be open and we need to be honest so that we have a better place from which to negotiate complexity and uncertainty. And the kinds of knowledge that matter here are distributed among different people. We have to share this negotiation. We have to share our knowledge and expertise. It has to be responsive to what's going on because we can't know everything in advance. And it has to be ethical because the implications of whatever we do with technology are far-reaching and subtle, and we need to kind of trace the different implications in different directions to work out what are the actual benefits, what are the actual harms going on here. So with all of that theory in the background, what I've done is, I don't want to say that I hadn't written my talk before the questions from the participants came in, but what I have managed to do is base my talk around those questions. So I've got some things that people said, which are, they wanted to know about examining useful digital tools, and they wanted tools to help staff and students embrace AI tools, and they wanted to know about latest developments in digital pedagogy, which hopefully other talks will go into more detail from. What I want to say is that we don't want to solve problems with tools or methods. We want to think about the context, the purpose, and the values, and we want to build awareness of the factors that influence integration into learning situations. So rather than just thinking about digital tools, we want to bring in this awareness of like what makes a useful digital tool in this context for me right now. And we want to build this distributed expertise. Now, I'm going to come back to a lot of these ideas over and over again as I address the different questions, and I'll hopefully you'll see why as I go.
Halfway
But
point.
one thing I want to say just briefly is that you're responsible for your values. So it's very easy. Let's say my values are inclusivity or flexibility or care or some ethical values, or maybe it's even efficiency or something. Nobody else is going to protect those for me. I need to think about those in the mix of all the complexity that's going on. What kind of literacy and skills and technological knowledge do we need to be savvy in this kind of age? And this applies to generative artificial intelligence, other artificial intelligence, and all kinds of digital technology, I think. Well, the skills we need, the skills the students need aren't really specific skills. Yes, they do need those, but we can't prescribe what they are because they're changing all the time and we don't know what the context will be like at any moment, and everything is emergent. So really what they need is the capacity to learn quickly and adapt. And also, I want to say that skills aren't digital. Skills are embedded in the world. They're material and social as well as digital. So we need to not just think of like, what do people need to be able to do digitally, but what do people need to be able to do more broadly in the world that allows them to adapt to these very fast changing contexts. What does it mean to stay savvy in the era of AI? Well, for me, it means we don't try to work individually because it's too hard. There's too much knowledge and expertise needed to navigate the world of AI. So we need to work collectively. We need to collaborate with our colleagues. So for example, at program level or more broadly, we need to work openly with students because we don't have the literacy and expertise to tell them how to do good AI. So we need to know what they're doing, what they understand. We need to kind of help them think about that, and we can only do that in conversation. And we need to foster this distributed expertise and literacy where we have people with certain types of technical knowledge, certain types of pedagogical knowledge, certain types of ethical knowledge, different perspectives and different parts of the universities. So we really need to think about this as a collective problem rather than embedding knowledge in individuals. To navigate the uncertainty and complexity, how can you tell if a tool is going to be long-lived? Well, you can't really, but for one thing, you should be asking experts from different views rather than trying to figure it out yourself. And I think we need a framework for making decisions about these things. And we need to be open and negotiating on the fly. By which I mean, if we only invest in tools up front and then everyone has to use those tools, Students are going to go and find other tools as well, and tools are going to be superseded. So we need a way of being a little bit more adaptive than saying, we've bought these tools, now these are the only tools that you can use. How do we support staff? Well, again, we support staff by encouraging distributed expertise, structures for people to work together. We build in a framework for decision-making. We make sure that we build trust across different people in an institution, and we talk openly. Now, this isn't something individuals can do. This is something that everybody has to work together on. It's very difficult. So I'm not saying any of this is easy. How can we help students to be savvy in digital environments? Well, again, this is all about building trust and talking openly so that we know what students are actually doing, so that we can figure this out together. I think we need to learn a little bit about ethics of technology so we can be an informed partner in this kind of distributed expertise. We need to get help from people who actually know these sorts of things. And again, we really do need some kind of framework that helps us make complex decisions about complex things. How do we help neurodivergent people or be inclusive? Well, we don't try and solve any of those inclusion problems with tools, but we work openly and trusting, and we don't just buy technology, but again, we need this framework for decision making. So this is the end. We need to get this right collectively. We need different kinds of expertise working together. We need to think about our purposes and values and come towards some sort of shared direction. We need ways of balancing tension, because when everything is entangled like this, different people have different values. So how do we do that? And we need a way of taking complexity into account in all of these dealings. Thanks very much.
Bang on time. Thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah, that was absolutely fascinating and fabulous. And I don't know that any speaker has answered our audience's questions so specifically. I think you've done an absolutely fabulous job. Thank you, Tim. I'm definitely going to be looking into your theories a lot more. Next up, we have Isabel, I'm going to let Isabel introduce herself. I'm sure she'll do a much better job than I can.
Hello there. Yeah, my name is Isabel Bowditch. I'm at the moment I'm a digital assessment advisor at University College London, and previously an academic. My background's in arts and humanities. And we're actually doing something very similar to what Tim was talking about there at UCL. I'm part of an AI and education experts group, but it's really looking at different aspects of the impact of AI in education. And so we've got experts in AI, we've got experts in assessment and education, we've got experts in study skills and students. And so we all come together to try and form, like Tim was saying, to put together our expertise and really form the direction of travel at UCL. And I think this is happening across the sector. So that's me. Shall I share my slides now and get started?
Thanks, Isabel. That would be brilliant.
Okay. Let me just know. Can see them okay?
Yeah, all good.
Good. Okay, so I've done the introduction. So yeah, just before we go on here, because just so we're on the same page, what we're not talking about when we talk about AI in this context is what we call artificial general intelligence. So that kind of super intelligence that poses an existential threat to humanity as we know it. We're talking about generative AI, the one probably most of us have heard of now, which is a type of narrow, task-focused AI, which needs us as humans to provide that instruction to it. And it operates on a kind of pattern recognition basis, really using existing data. So generative AI, as we probably all know, just setting the scene here, it creates contents in a range of modalities. So we've got text, images, videos, code, and even voices and so on. But of course, as in education, we're really being very much focused on the text generators, probably because our assessments, at least in the UK, is very, very text focused. So, and the one we all know about is ChatGPT, but there's loads and loads coming on the market at pace, kind of gold rush out there. So let me just move on. I've got lots of slides, so I think I've got a bit maybe excessive slides here. So as a sector, I think we in the UK and probably across the world, we're trying to come to terms with what this means and how to respond to the generative AI with, I think, a growing acknowledgement that there's certain things that we really is pointless to do, I guess. So one is we can't ignore it. It's already here. It's already embedded in our lives, just in the same way, really, that smartphones and other technologies have. So, and you probably know that Microsoft are embedding a version of ChatGPT in their software called MS Copilot. So that will be released in their Office suite very soon. So for the same reasons, it's futile to ban it. I think some universities did try this at first. Italy tried to ban it and have gone back on that decision. And people like Sarah Eaton, who you might have heard of, she's an expert in academic integrity, and she says that this hybrid human and AI writing is going to become the norm. It's going to become impossible, really, to draw the line between what's human-generated and AI-generated writing. We can't outrun it with AI detection tools. There's too many, I suppose, ethical data protection issues around AI detection tools. We've seen that with Turnitin, producing too many false positives. So, and also there's this whole stream of new applications. So it's really, it's like, you know, cat and mouse game. It's not that useful, really, to try and design assessments around what it can and can't do, because like Tim was saying earlier, these things are changing all the time. Although we do have to maybe do a bit of that right now. So it seems like the only viable option for us really is to try and embrace it and adapt it responsibly and with caution, a good dose of caution. The drink of water. So you might wonder why I've put these on the next slide. These are the, just bear with me. So these are the commonly cited pillars of assessment. So we've got things like value, which is the quality of information that we gain from assessments, and the impact on student learning. We've got things like purpose, what we're assessing, why we're assessing, and so on, and what tools we use to that end. We've got validity, which is something that's often talked about in terms of assessment, which is, you know, are we actually measuring what we set out to measure? And reliability, which is the consistency of our marking process, and so on. And underpinning all of these, really, are all of our values and priorities, things like inclusion, authenticity, and all the things we talk about. So it seems to me that with the increase in digital assessment methods, there's a temptation to sideline all of these priorities in favour of security. I put that in big letters there. It might resonate with you, I don't know, but in my conversation with faculty at UCL, since post-COVID, where we moved, like everyone else, to remote online assessment, after that, we saw a surge in demand for assessment security measures, so in-person exams, lockdown browsers, proctoring, and so on. We don't actually do proctoring at UCL, but there was a lot of requests for that, this kind of knee-jerk reaction because of concern about academic integrity. At the same time, there was a huge increase in requests for reasonable adjustments for students for these in-person exams, students with different needs. So we can deduce really that increased security comes at the expense of some of our core values like equity and inclusion. And now, although we want to embrace AI at UCL, we're saying that's our direction of travel, embrace and adapt. Until we work out how to do that, this concern around academic integrity has really turbocharged that security angle. I mean, security is important. We've got to guarantee our awards and guarantee that students gain them on their own merits. But I think once we come to terms with where we are, the conversation about AI can be really fruitful in terms of trying to reevaluate what matters in assessment for us. And as Mike Sharples has said, he's kind of expert in AI that you've probably heard speaking at various forums. that, you know, we need to help students with the technology rather than against it.
Halfway.
Oh, thank you. So how are we going to ensure that assessment methods meet students' needs in an AI-enabled world? Well, I always go back to the good old learning outcomes, but I think going forward, these aren't going to look quite like our Bloom's taxonomy, at least as we know it. And according to experts in this area, Rose Luckin and others, the kind of capabilities, skills that graduates are going to need are going to look like to thrive in future life and work are going to look like something like this. So emotional intelligence, contextual intelligence, imagination, and so on. The kind of things we think of as being uniquely human, so I suppose unique to human embodied experience, because AI, of course, doesn't have a body, doesn't live in the world. And when we talk to staff in my role at UCL, when I talk to staff around what learners should be assessed in the AI-enabled world, we very, very frequently get things like critical thinking, creativity, but also AI terminology starting to kind of filter through. So things like, you might be able to see this in this screen on this slide here, prompt engineering and fact checking. Those are things we would never have seen even a few months ago. So we still don't really know what the landscape is going to look like, but we do need to prepare ourselves and our students to engage with the AI usefully and responsibly and ethically, as Tim was saying before. So at UCL, we're developing both short and longer term strategies, and I know that other institutions are doing the same. And in the short term, we're looking at what can be done. Sorry, I didn't realise I had animations on that one. We're looking at what can be done now within existing regulatory frameworks and trying to not increase the workload of staff too much at this point. So I think the single most important thing you can do, and this reflects on what Tim was saying, was talk to students. They may well know a lot more about it than we do, and we know that students are already using it. And so we need to talk to them. Why are they using it? What are they using it for? Do they think it's good? And so on. Ask them to question the authority and the ethics of AI outputs. We know that a lot of the AI outputs are actually factually false information, material that reproduces biases and so on. So building that critical AI literacy is absolutely key. And we also need to provide clear guidance to students about how it should be used, if it's been used at all, and how to acknowledge it. Some students are really super confident with it. They'll have various subscriptions to different software and so on. And others, we've heard, are really too scared to even now use spell check in case they get called out for cheating. And let's remember that AI could be very, very helpful for those of us with disabilities, dyslexia and so on. So there is an equity issue there and a responsibility on us to ensure that everyone's on a level playing field. The other thing, with or without AI, I think, is to really increase feedback and formative assessment opportunities. This builds students' competence and confidence, and it helps students to really focus on their learning process rather than the end product. The reason I put this image here is because I was thinking about life drawing as an example. So I used AI to produce this charcoal sketch of a man, which you might think is technically quite good. But if I really need to hone my drafting and observation skills and develop my personal style and understand how I deal with trial and error, taking this shortcut is a pointless exercise. So we've got to be really careful to not kind of leapfrog, if we are embracing AI, not leapfrog straight to the outcome, and think about really what do students need to understand about their learning process. Third thing, of course, is to adapt existing assessment practices. I won't read through all of these, but I'll share the slides with you afterwards, of course, and there's a lot of links at the end slides with practical examples of how to actually do this with existing assessments.
1 minute left.
Yeah. So this is about written assessments and MCQs. We can share this with you afterwards. But I think in the long term, it's about really reevaluating that, going back to that, why we're assessing, and what we're assessing and why. And looking much more in the future at UCL, we're really focusing on programme level assessment, interdisciplinary focus. And I guess we're all used to change in education, and there's no doubt AI is a big change, maybe bigger than most. But we're all feeling our way, and it's uncertain and rapidly evolving environment. But I think that letting AI take the stage, rather than letting AI take the stage, if we really stay focused on our role as educators and valuing our pedagogical insights, how learning happens and how to best support students through this transition, then that will really go a long way to supporting us as well. So I think it's really valuing our role as educators and not letting the technology divert us from that. So here's some really good ideas for working with AI in your teaching. Links are there, and these are some of the references and resources if you want to follow up on them. So that's me finished.
Thank you very much. There's loads in there, and Ron's put the link in, if people haven't spotted that, it's in the chat. And I think we're over to Lillian. Is that right, Lillian?
No, the other Lillian, which is Teresa. Teresa, welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Teresa's going to be sharing.
There are no
her...
two Lillians.
I thought I got in my head your students' video.
Yeah, well, what we're going to do is we're going to let Teresa go first, and then I'll tell you about Jordan's experience with AI tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry about that. Sorry, Teresa. So
No worries.
here you are. If you want to get your screen up and going, and then I'll start the stopwatch.
Yep.
You ready?
Hopefully you're seeing my screen now.
We can see that. So off you go then.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm so delighted. I'm a bit of a fangirl, Tim, I'm afraid, but I'm so delighted to have had entanglement explained, because actually, as I look back over my career, entanglement is exactly what I've been suffering from for many years. So I'm going to talk very quickly because I know we've got 4 presenters today. So I'm going to sort of shorten this presentation, but it's all shared online, and I know it's already in the Xerte object, about the role that I play within an organisation called Uni Collaboration. And it's with that hat on really that I'm talking today. So we're a not-for-profit organisation, and our focus is specifically on virtual exchange. So virtual exchange is pretty much the digitally mediated version of what we used to call exchanges and educational exchange. We used to physically get on buses and go to countries and meet people and learn about their cultures. Well, we don't need the bus now. We can actually do that virtually. But it's complex, and virtual exchange requires a lot of planning, a lot of collaboration, and presents lots and lots of problems. So I was one of a cohort of many people who started engaging in virtual exchange with the advent of the internet, and really with my computer-assisted language learning academic hat on, was looking at how we could improve the experience and how we could avoid some of the issues. And that's how Uni Collaboration as an organisation was born, really, a group of experienced educators looking to bring the learning from computer-mediated communication in language learning settings to a wider interdisciplinary cohort to share that. So we're looking specifically at some of those challenges and training individual practitioners. And what we're trying to do, so we're connecting international practitioners together. And what we're trying to do is to look at wicked problems and to how virtual exchange can solve some of those wicked problems. It's very much tied up in the importance of socially accessible education. And what we're trying to do is bring meetings of minds across geographical distance and combat some of the issues that are involved in trying to create trust, as Tim was mentioning earlier, between different cultures, between different nationalities and different contexts. So that's the the space, if you like, that we're working in, and obviously doing that virtually. And on the ground, in terms of students, well, here's one of the physical meetings that was part of my virtual exchange, which was called Clavier, where we actually all got round a table to talk. So we had that luxury of sharing food and not just talking about it digitally. And it was my experiences through that that brought me very much in terms of experience to this idea of entanglement, which Tim explains and presented and summarized very competently for us just now. Because what we need to do is to enable our students, but also our staff, to connect with psychologically, to get closer psychologically, despite the barriers that exist. And those barriers exist in physical settings as well as in digital settings, but they can very quickly become very entrenched in digital settings. So we have to be aware that when we're working in the wilds, as it's sometimes called, we have to try to approach some of those barriers and pull those barriers down to make sure that we are respecting our duty of care to our students and of course to each other. We're also making sure that we have some sort of learning that is sustainable. And it's a little bit like, you know, trying to carry a very, very full glass of water on a shifting moving pavement that can go off at in any direction at any time, as has already been demonstrated. And AI is just the latest challenge really to managing to do that. But here are just some of the challenges that when I train and work with individual practitioners and institutions around the world, we have to discuss and we have to look at finding ways of combating some of these issues. So these are the sort of topics that we regularly come up against, and as you can see, ethics is very fundamental to it. Cost is there, and that's not only financial cost, it's actually the cost in terms of time. So we have to get people on those as they're planning their virtual exchange, make sure that they have the resources and the support that they will need in order to tackle some of these sorts of issues. And for that, and I'm going to put a link into the chat here so that you can explore something later, perhaps when you've got
halfway point.
Time. Yeah. I use a document called a tool parade. It's a dynamic Google Doc, which I share every time we have training sessions with different practitioners. It's very much based around the work done by Sean Michael Morris and Jesse Stommel, and you might be aware of their hybrid pedagogy blog. It's very much thinking about putting our values at the heart of what we do. But the document itself, as you'll see if you've managed to open it, is based a lot around the functionalities that you might be looking for as you're planning a virtual exchange, and where to go to get tools that you could try and tools that perhaps you haven't met yet. And when I use this document as an approach really to broaching the issue of tool choice for planning virtual exchange, it's a dynamic document because all the time people come back with issues or problems or things that aren't yet dealt with. So it keeps getting updated. So you'll see there's more work there now on fact checking that hasn't been there in the past. So versions of this document are constantly added to. So do keep that link because you'll get the latest version of the document where if you download it, obviously it's going to be fixed in time. And what we're trying to do is to think specifically around critical digital literacies. These are the sort of takeaways, if you like, from our session, which is essentially a dialogic session that we have in the training where we try things out and we think about what tasks are you going to get your learners to do, how are you going to facilitate that, where are you going to have those conversations, how can they have agency in that process rather than just being told, go here, do this. So we try to make sure people find and join trusted communities such as Future Teacher, and there are plenty there that we look at and they're on the document as well. Approaching tool choice with an open mindset and flexibility, and that can be difficult because often, as Tim said, you're entangled here. You may be told by your institution that you have to use certain tools. But remember, institutions are planning those tools just for the students within that institution. They're not thinking about connecting institutions around the world. Also, and I think it often gets forgotten, is that when we are interacting and encouraging things like virtual exchange, we need to, alongside that, provide spaces for reflection. And some of the approaches that have worked very well in virtual exchange are things like autoethnographic reflection. So thinking about how you've chosen tools in the past, how's that affected you, how's that gone for you, giving people time maybe to blog around that, using things like e-portfolios, give examples, but also using open research and feedback mechanisms to make sure that people are feeding back their experiences. So finally, just a few links that you can follow up on, but you will easily find me online. And of course, now I'm part of the Future Teacher team, so I'm here as well too. So I hope that tool parade document, if you get time to look at it, is something that you will feed back to me on, and let me know whether you think that's a useful way of facilitating these discussions.
Thank you very much for that, Teresa. I love the way you've kind of managed to weave everything back into what the other speakers have already brought up. So Mike's got a question for you, which you can answer in the chat. And before we come to our discussion, I'm just going to share a link with you. And I think I'm going to stop. How do we stop Teresa's screen sharing? Or maybe Teresa has to stop her screen sharing. Ah, there we go.
There we go.
So there you go. I'm not going to play Jordan's video because I think that partly because it would be 22 minutes and I think that would take us beyond our time. But my student at the Uni of York, PhD student Jordan Booker, has very kindly brought together a display, an insight into her use of tools. So she's neurodiverse, she's got ADHD. She's helped us at the university to start a community. So as Teresa says, you know, making sure that students can come together. So she started this student community called the Distractables. And she's very, very much, although tools aren't supposed to be the answer, I take that from Tim's talk. What Jordan has done is that for her, these assistive technologies help to calm or manage, self-manage. So she's sharing with you in this video an insight into how her brain works and how she then goes about finding things that will help her to be more productive. And she also talks about some of her approaches, like she does change tools, you know, this idea of like finding one thing that will last forever. I don't know that that works anymore. So she talks about how she, you know, adapts and chooses the tool that works for her at any one point in time. So that adaptability is certainly key. Okay, so we've all got that, and we will link it back on our main website as well. So I think now it's over to question and answers and to see what's been happening in the chat. I don't know if Alistair, Teresa, Rosemary, any interesting things to bring into play here?
Lots of bits and pieces on the chat. I don't know, Rosemary or Teresa spotted anything near the beginning.
I can pick up on Mike's question in the chat.
Yeah.
So in terms of evaluation and comments for the tools in the Tool Parade document, that's part of the session that I lead, which is a couple of hours online session. So people go off into breakout rooms, they spend time exploring the document, and then we come back and have a discussion with it. And that discussion can go off into lots of different directions, obviously depending on the contexts of the people that we're training at the time. so that's the way we deal with that at the moment. I'm kind of hovering around as well, doing some writing something up around you know, how the tool parade document has influenced people's planning. But now I've retired, I don't quite have that same push, but yeah, perhaps I should do. And I've certainly got lots of documents and detail there that I can draw on.
I think it's a very interesting point when we're talking about getting savvy, and the fact that Teresa has retired, but she's still in.
Still not
Do you-
savvy enough.
No, no, no. I
Still
think
want to learn.
still savvy. So I have my daughter's grandparents. He's going to be 90 next year, but he teaches all the other older people in the village how to get on the internet and stuff, because he's really savvy. He's really kept up with his operating systems, with what he's supposed to know about scams, and about using a whole range of technology. And we tend to be very learner focused, obviously, because a lot of us come from that with that education background. But actually, aren't we, as our parents get older, aren't we always in a position where we're having to teach them as well? And I think it's a message for me personally to kind of think, don't be the older person who suddenly needs help from a younger person because you haven't kept up. You know, when my daughter goes, oh, can't you use such and such, you know, Minecraft in her day, or, you know, VR headsets or whatever. And I find myself sometimes hesitating, but I have made a promise to myself that I will go and try these things, you know. So a lot of us, I'm sure, have been trying ChatGPT or trying AI generated imagery or video. And I, you know, I think we have to keep up with all these things, you know, put on a VR headset and just keep trying all these different technologies. So I just wonder if it would be quite interesting in the chat, the latest thing that you tried that scared you, the latest bit of technology that maybe you tried to get to grips with would be quite interesting for people to mention in the chat. But
I think there are. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there. There was a gap in the in my slight dropout. I just wanted to say that there were some questions which I think are potentially really important right back at the beginning. Where
I think there was one from Emma, which I've just put back into the chat.
Well, I was thinking of the one from Heather, which has got immediate implications for a number of organisations. JCQ awarding bodies asking for centres to evidence how they're checking for the use of AI in submitted work. So I don't know if anybody else is in that position, or if that's new information, new scary information. But how would you do it? What tools would people use? I'd just be interested in either people telling us what goes on with them or popping it in the text chat.
Yeah, what do we do? And it ties in with what Mike was asking earlier about, you know, we're in this framework or system around assessment where sometimes the lecturers themselves have no agency because it's a professional qualification and they have to meet certain standards. There's also the sense that even students resist when you sometimes want to put in more authentic assessments. They see it as more work and they say, can't we just write an essay? So all these different perspectives to trying to change as technology changes. And I take from Tim's thing about that human angle, that social angle, you know. And I don't know, Tim, if you want to come back in and comment on, you know, that expression of like, it's not just digital, there's so many other facets that we have to take into account.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk forever on these topics, so just stop me at some point. But when I think of literacy and skills, and I do agree with what you're saying, that you have to be try things out, or you will become it will become too difficult for you to engage with things. But I also think it's not feasible for example, educators to become very skilled at a lot of technologies, or to become really AI literate in some kind of comprehensive sense. I don't think that's realistic, because we're so stretched, and because we have other things. We can't get so distracted by artificial intelligence that we forget all of the other things that we're already struggling to do, that we know we need to do as educators, and to learn about education so that we actually know what it is we should be trying to do in the first place. So that's partly why I say that it all needs to be a kind of collective enterprise, because it's not feasible for an individual to know enough. And it wasn't even before generative artificial intelligence exploded last year. It already wasn't feasible for us to know enough. And so we need to kind of find ways of developing this shared expertise that will help us go forward, support mechanisms in institutions so that we're not alone, and better ways of working, because students are a good resource for helping us negotiate technology, for example. In that, if you've got a group of 30 students, there's a lot of knowledge in that group. There's a lot of, I don't subscribe to the idea that students are all better at technology than we are, because I think that's a nuanced thing. Like I'll give you an example. Recently, there were a couple of kids at a party, and they were watching TV, and the parents wanted them to stop watching TV, and they couldn't get them to just do it obediently. So they turned the TV off, but they turned it off at the wall. And then these kids spent 15 minutes trying to turn the TV back on, and they didn't get anywhere near the socket. So they might be brilliant at Minecraft and various other things, but they aren't technologically necessarily knowledgeable in all these different ways. So to summarize, I think there's no way around having to get better at working together, and we can use structures like frameworks and institutional policies to do that, but we also need trust building and open conversation and resisting the whole neoliberal thing. And I'm not saying it's easy. I don't know how else we kind of move forward rather than getting better at working collectively.
That's such a good example. We see it all in our young people, don't we? Lots of people. Someone mentioned Excel. We take that for granted. We take a lot of our skills for granted that we've already acquired, and it's always hard for an expert, in inverted commas, to teach a novice. And I think that will always be the thing we have to be so careful about. Lots of interesting chat as well about Amazon, for whatever reason, and the ethics of using Amazon, and the savviness of like cancelling before you get charged for it. That's quite funny. Okay, so I wonder if anyone else would like, Mike, I don't know if you want to pop in now and say any. I liked your question there. Most students want a qualification, not an education. And again, I think that is one of those issues that once you've got past a level of experience and learning, you want very different things. And it's very easy to think that the students in your care want the same thing as you, but they haven't had that lifetime of experience, so they can't possibly want the same things as you, and so you're at opposite ends of this invisible bubble, and it's this entanglement thing that probably will help. Like you say, everybody has to get together and everybody has to talk to find out what it is that you're trying to figure out together.
I think there is an issue also with where, in fact, we discussed this, the Future Teacher Planning Team discussed this last week, or when we were together. It's the issue where interfaces are changing so often where there's an update in a tool. And I think I would be probably much more inclined to use a tool if I had a guarantee that they weren't going to radically change the interface or the functionality in a way that then disabled me in 6 months' time. And I know when you're dealing with less confident learners, I remember trying to teach my mum how to use an iPad, and whenever an interface was refreshed, she just didn't have the confidence to start again or to work her way around it. So I don't know if part of our digital savviness is perhaps encouraging people encouraging users to be much more adept at kind of knowing what to look for and where to look for it if it isn't where they find it or expect it, but also encouraging designers to stop showing off.
Yeah, to be fair, they probably don't consider it showing off. But it's true, it is frustrating. But it kind of points again back to the flexibility and the shared endeavor. One thing I always say to folk when I'm working with them is that this isn't an issue that you're going to solve. Forget the unicorn in the room that says the tech will solve your problem. It won't. It will generate lots of different problems, and you can't solve it on your own. You're going to need a village, preferably a large one.
And
there was,
that's a good.
Sorry, you go.
It's a good opportunity to give a shout out because there's lots of people in the chat commenting on the real benefit we can get from appreciating our professional staff, learning technologists, learning and teaching centres, librarians, who all bring some of that digital savviness that we can benefit from if we need that support.
Absolutely, big shout out to them all, because often as well, I think there's within institutions, I'm free now of those sort of constraints, but within institutions we don't allow enough time within any workload model for people to get to know others who are working in different contexts. And actually that takes time.
And I think we do have to draw our webinar to a close. Lots of people are having to move on as well. And I've popped in our next session, 28th of September. We're going to have summer off. We normally do in the Future Teacher session. And you can sign up for that session. And it's going to be about designing appropriate assessments. If you look back at previous years' recordings, pre-AI, I think there's going to be a new terminology now, PAI. It's really interesting to look at all our recordings in the past and see that development of technology, but the underlying problems have always stayed with us. So exactly right, the technology just adds another layer of noise half the time, but then you will get people who are able to share with you how the technology has enabled, has solved problems, and certainly has become very good for inclusion and assistive needs. So really, really kind of useful, really loved and enjoyed all the sessions from our speakers today. Thank you very much. Teresa will be sending digital badges to everyone.
Including to herself.
Including to herself. I'm going to stop the recording here.